Today, Hunter Biden reportedly intends to change his not guilty plea to federal tax charges. A proposed Office of New Oklahomans would facilitate illegal immigration into one of the reddest states in America. And Florida voters could enshrine abortion into the state constitution. We have those stories and so much more. Blaze News Tonight starts right now. Welcome to the chaos. I'm Jill Savage. Today is Thursday, September 6th. Last night, Donald Trump sat down with Sean Hannity for a town hall interview in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and Trump laid out his plan for America, and fact checkers immediately pounced on every word out of Donald Trump's mouth. So here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief for Blaze News, and Chris Bedford, senior editor for politics and Washington correspondent for Blaze Media. So Chris, let's start with the interview itself, because I think now we're up to about 36 for Trump and Vance to 1 for Harris and Walz. So what were your takeaways from last night's town hall?
Trump's back in his natural state, I think, as we saw on the town hall. In the week or two after he was shot in the head, he was understandably a little off, maybe a little demurred, a little quieter in a lot of his deliveries. But we saw a little bit of that old Donald Trump there, and it was funny. They made some jokes on set about how few interviews Kamala Harris has given. I think after about 16 minutes or so, the host suggested that the interview was already finished, because that was how long Kamala Harris and Walz had given in that ridiculous CNN interview the other day. But it was a good night for Donald Trump, and what's shocking is how many people showed up to watch it live. It was a popular event. There were no buses coming in from Boston to fill it up. It was a good evening for the candidate.
So, Chris, morning after is interesting these days because we get the fact checkers, the parade of fact checks that come out. Can you tell us some of the most ridiculous of those, looking around?
Well, there was one of my favorites was when Donald Trump suggested that the war wouldn't have started had he still been president, the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It was basically the only administration that we've had since 2000 where Russia hasn't invaded anyone was Donald Trump's, which was an administration that was marked by deterrence, a strong deterrence around the world. It was the walk soft, kind of carry a big stick sort of mantra that he had there. He was fact-checked wrong or false by PolitiFact, which is one of those partisan fact checkers. He said, well, presidents aren't really in charge of when wars start. Well, that's ridiculous. The president is the most powerful person on the planet. Other countries react and react to what the president is doing. This has actually been a mainstay of left-wing criticism of Donald Trump was, oh, well, he's abnormal. He's disruptive to the world stage. Now, he's nowhere. It just becomes difficult for them to defend when you've got the embarrassment of the Afghan withdrawal, all the different debacles that unfolded there when you've got the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That stuff doesn't start to add up, but they like to fact check it anyways. They went on and on. One of the fact checks went at when he called Kamala Harris Comrade Kamala and said, well, actually, she's not a member of the Soviet Union party. She's not an official member. She's actually kind of a capitalist, just one who proposes price controls. That's ridiculous. It's political banter. And there's something behind this. I mean, PolitiFact is one of the main fact check organizations. You got Pointer out there to the arm of that. These guys go out and they try to be the arbiters of what is inside and outside acceptable decorum, what politicians are allowed to say, what newspapers are allowed to say, what people on Facebook and on Twitter are allowed to say. They try to make themselves as arbiters, and tech companies and other media allies of theirs have used these fact checks to actually silence people. Remember, famously, when Hunter Biden's laptop story was censored, essentially, the FBI said it was fake. Twitter came out and said, well, we're just going to censor it right now. But the fact checks will come. Trust us.
Well,
The fact checks never actually came.
yeah.
It wasn't false. It was a correct story, but it already started. They rely heavily on this system. It's part of an ecosystem that allows them to suppress dissent.
Hunter Biden making more headlines today because they said that he will come out and accept a guilty verdict in his tax evasion case, which, he's charged with failing to pay at least $1.4 million in federal taxes while living an extravagant lifestyle. So when you hear this story, when you see all of this, is this going to be a satisfying ruling for people with all? I mean, we know all of his shady business dealings that he had with Burisma and the laptop that you mentioned that all just go uninvestigated.
Well, somewhat. I've long thought, and I've disagreed with a lot of my friends on this, that Weiss, the prosecutor here, is a guy whose main position is to cover himself, to cover his butt, a CYA guy as opposed to a strict partisan. And he was attacked and undermined enough by Democrats when he was trying to go soft on Hunter Biden to protect, I think, the administration, that he said enough to that and was willing to go a little harder. Now, Hunter obviously escaped the FARA violations. He escaped the sort of working with foreign shady governments and his whole family doing so. But this one actually does carry serious consequences. This morning, when we woke up, the news was that Hunter was going to say, listen, I was too drunk to file tax returns properly for those couple of years. And that probably wasn't going to fly, or more of us would use it. So now he was going to go with the Alford plea, which was, yeah, I'm guilty. Like, you're going to prove I'm guilty, but I'm not guilty. I didn't actually do this. I am innocent, which is a plea which arose historically from a defendant who was facing death for a murder. The case looked like he was going to lose it. So he pled guilty to second-degree murder, 30 years in prison, not going to get the electric chair in exchange, but at the same time said, but I didn't do this. I'm maintaining my innocence, but I'll plead guilty to get these 30 years and not get the chair. Well, the prosecution rejected that. And the judge decided, well, why don't you try again? So Hunter comes in today and says, well, fine, I'm just guilty. I just did it, which is a little more satisfying, at least. I'm surprised the DOJ was going to let him get away with, or not get away with it. I thought they might say, sure, that's fine. That works for us. So the judge at this moment, it's not all over yet because we're on California time. It's basically explaining, hey, kid, or adult man, this comes with years in prison and millions of dollars in fines, potentially. Are you willing to face that? So far, it looks like the answer is yes. Now, of course, the White House is denying that his father is going to pardon him. But why wouldn't he? I mean, he's an outgoing president who's been betrayed by his party. Who cares if he causes wreckage in his debris left behind in his wake? They'll probably pardon his kid.
Chris, I know that in August of 2022, you and Jill and many others were deeply saddened when CNN canceled Brian Stelter's Reliable Sources. Ironically, Reliable Sources is back, right? And here it comes from the dead. And not only is Brian Stelter back, he is the chief media analyst at CNN. What is driving this?
Well, Brian Stelter, it always shocks me when I realize that he and I are the same age, because evil wears on you as a person, I think. But he's actually not an evil guy. He's just a palace tool. He's not a bad person personally. He's just someone who does the bidding of the regime, and he does the bidding of Jeff Zucker, who was previously in charge of CNN. So when Zucker got fired or kicked out, they got rid of him too, because you had this kind of creepy little Privy Council eunuch who followed him around and defended the throne. And he didn't want him in charge or around if you were now a new person in charge. But he stayed loyal. He stayed loyal to the brand. He continued to be that little palace guard, just yipping at the enemies of CNN and defending the brand until someone just said, all right, let's just give this guy another chance. But it is funny. It's like deja vu. We've got all this stuff in the news right now about Russia. We've got Stelter's back. We've got fact checks on Comrade Kamala and whether wars can be started. This seems like a weakened, watered-down version of a playbook that we saw 8 years ago and 4 years ago.
Well, don't worry, Bedford. You still look much younger than Brian Stelter. So don't worry, you got that going for you. Thanks for coming on today.
Great to be here.
One of the reddest states in the union is considering a plan to attract illegal aliens. We'll tell you what's going on in Oklahoma up next. Did you know there's nearly $1 trillion of infrastructure and pandemic funds yet to be spent? There is a massive amount of money that the lame duck administration is pushing hard into spending in their last few months, because if you got it, spend it. If the president is able to push these funds out, we could see another prolonged inflation surge, just like we did with the COVID years. And I'm sure that you remember all of the terrible effects and high prices that had for most Americans. But there is hope. A surge in prices can be beaten. A gold IRA from Birch Gold Group is the ultimate hedge against inflation for your savings in uncertain times. So to see how to protect your IRA or 401k, get your free info kit on gold by texting the word Jill to 989898. And Birch Gold makes it seamless to roll over your retirement account while preserving your tax advantage status. So don't wait for the president's spending spree to tank the dollar any further. Protect your financial future now. Text Jill to the number 989898 for your free info kit from Birch Gold. In a recent piece for theblaze.com, Daniel Horowitz, the host of Conservative Review with Daniel Horowitz and senior editor for Blaze News, wrote about Oklahoma's proposed plans to bring in more illegal immigrants. And Daniel joins us now. So can you explain, what is Oklahoma doing to try and attract all of these illegal immigrants?
Well, it's great to be with you guys in person today. Look, I thought finally years worth of tens of millions of illegals pumping into the country, I thought that would finally be a cathartic moment for the Republican Party. And rhetorically, you find a lot of Republicans broadly saying, oh, look at the Biden border crisis is terrible. But here's where the rubber meets the road. When you're a governor and you're not just inveighing as a senator against the president, you have the power to enforce laws as part of state laws as the governor of Oklahoma has. And you not only refuse to enforce the state's law, which they just passed to actually kick them out, it is on injunction in the courts, but to actively invite them in. And my first observation is that tells me that the mainstream elected Republican leaders have not fundamentally changed on the issue, that they believe that after 50 to 60 years of record legal and illegal immigration, it's not enough. It's not enough. That is the upshot of what his task force is saying. We need more nurses, engineers, accountants. It's not just people picking lettuce. That was the John McCain line. So then they moved on from the lettuce. Now it's essentially every bachelor's degree job we need more of. Now, they don't say the word illegal usually when they talk about it. But here's the deal. They say they're going to give visas and licenses and work permits. Now, if you're here legally, you get that from the federal government, and you get a driver's license in all 50 states if you're here legally. So I think we know who they're talking about.
Okay, so just what's so insane about this that I want to wrap my head around is, and we need to say this over and over again to people because it's not clear because no one reports on it. I mean, very few people talk about it. The fact that you're talking about it is what's so essential. Just stop a minute. We're talking about one of the reputed most conservative states in the union of the 50 states, with a reputation of being a place that is red state America to the core. And in this state, the governor is inviting illegal immigrants in and has a policy that basically is disastrous in so many ways. So explain who besides yourself is speaking out about this. What kind of flack is he taking, and what is the response from him and his administration?
I think the problem is in red state America, too many people have become complacent. They assume we don't have the San Francisco, New York problems, although now in Oklahoma, because of the criminal justice laws, because of the legal aliens, they have Chinese marijuana growers screwing up, rural America there in really nice parts of the state. People just feel like they don't need to fight, and Democrats aren't a threat. So, hey, we go to sleep. But the problem is the Democrats live vicariously through Republicans like Kevin Stitt. And absent intervention, they will continue doing what they always do. So they'll get on TV and say, look at Joe Biden's border crisis. And then they'll say, look, we don't want to enforce the law here. And in fact, despite everyone coming in, it's one state up from Texas, we need more. So the good news is this week, the Oklahoma legislature, the conservatives in the legislature announced the creation of the State Freedom Caucus, the 12th state to get one. And it cannot come soon enough because, here's the deal. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 months from now. We all hope Trump wins, but the reality is that it could go either way. There is 50% of the states where we should be able to say we are not having illegal immigration here. But if we don't ratchet up the pressure on people like Kevin Stitt, we're going to have Kamala's policies working in all 50 states.
When I hear you say all of this, and it's great that the Freedom Caucus is going to be there, I look at it and say, okay, but it's not the Republican governors of old where they didn't have any cover. Nobody was sticking their neck out. Like Ron DeSantis exists in America right now. He is going out there and paving that path for these other governors. All they have to do is just follow what he's doing. They don't have to figure out what works and what doesn't. Like he's been a very good barometer of what has been working. And, his previous election showed that in the way that he dominated that in the state of Florida. So why are we still having weak Republican governors?
Because we sleep during primaries. I mean, it's that simple. It has shocked me. I've been doing primaries for about 15 years. We've actually gone backwards in terms of focus. We fall asleep. We worry about everything but the Democrats, but the media. But again, there's 50% of the country where the Democrats are not a factor. Whoever wins the primary wins the general election. To augment your point, in Florida, okay, DeSantis won it by 30,000 votes in 2018. It was the consummate swing state. Oklahoma is a state where not a single county has voted for the Democrat nominee for president since the year 2000. Okay, so the Democrats should not be a factor. Why they do it? It's the corporate interests. It's their donors. In the case of Kevin Stitt, it's a certain, in my view, perverted strain of evangelical belief that he believes we need to be welcoming. It's the same reason why he's an avid supporter of jailbreak, what he calls criminal justice reform, weak on crime laws. It's very bizarre. You wouldn't expect it in a state like that, but I'm going to tell you, this is what we're going to continue to get. You extrapolate Florida, very urban. Okay, third largest state, very diverse. If DeSantis is able to accomplish that there, what does that say about Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, all these states we should be running up the score?
And shouldn't it, with Colorado, with the things that are happening there in Aurora, and the sheriffs have come out and confirmed that, the gang members from Venezuela were actually taking over some apartment complexes in the city. With that happening on U.S. soil right now, it's absurd to me that we just kind of sit back and say, oh, but illegal immigration, that's still going to be okay. Like, how much more of these takeovers are we going to see of cities if this is allowed to continue?
Well, the answer is it's not just New York City and Chicago. You are seeing it in places like Tulsa and Oklahoma City. I mean, this is a big problem. And by the way, this is how the left gradually turns mid-sized red state cities blue. Republicans are losing their grip on Tulsa and Oklahoma City, which in itself is a very big problem. Again, I'm impressed. I have a very low opinion of these people. I know they're all, anything legal is good, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, but illegal at this time with the gangs going on that we don't have enough, even I'm impressed.
So do you think that enough people, say in Colorado or Oklahoma, are aware of this in a way that, that you'd actually say they really know what's going on? Is that the case, or is it the case that people aren't aware? Are they aware and just not doing anything and complacent? Or do you think enough people in these states who are lean red actually know what's going on?
Here's the problem, and this is why it's so important to have local conservative media. The media is not going to say,
right,
Kevin Stitt is promoting illegal immigration because they want to keep that quiet. Because, in some parts of the country, it will resonate, certainly not there. Yeah. So this has been the problem, why we try here to expose some of this, because if the voters would only be connected with what's happening at the executive level with the governor, the legislative sessions, they would be outraged. And again, it's something that just with our demographics alone, within our sphere of influence, we could totally change this around in half the country for free.
Well, half the country, yes, we definitely could. I would love to see even more than that with what's going on. But like in New York right now, you just see the illegal immigrants accused of all of the crimes, and they're allowed to stay at the taxpayer-funded shelters. Homeless veterans on the street. Right now, illegals are getting housing in New York City for free. And, you know, it's what, 75% of the people that are getting arrested in New York right now for the abuse is all of the illegals that are coming out right now. Like, we just keep seeing all of the crime statistics that are coming out day after day after day. And nothing, to Matthew's point, is enough right now to be that tipping point.
No, and that's the thing. And that's why, as I've said many times, this is not a border crisis. This is every neighborhood crisis, because they don't stay in the border counties. So you're talking about millions of people. It's no longer the 3-5 largest cities. It's, you take any state, and any mid-sized city now is dealing with a baseline level of record level of domestic criminal vagrancy and homelessness. That was to begin with the problem. And then we're like, hey, we don't have enough of it domestically, so let's import the problems from elsewhere. Another thing you're seeing with some of those stories in New York and Chicago, but also the smaller cities with the Venezuelan gangs, qualitatively, we've never had this before. MS-13, as problematic as they are, they largely stayed in certain neighborhoods. These guys have shown a proclivity. They'll attack cops. They'll attack anyone. They're attacking. So this fight is going to outrage the American people. Mm-hmm. The question is, do we do something about it before it's too late?
Something else that will outrage the American people. Daniel will be sticking with us to explain how abortion could be embedded into the Florida state constitution. Don't go anywhere. For the past few weeks, Florida's Amendment 4 has sparked debate among conservatives, and the initiative would prevent representatives from passing any law prohibiting, penalizing, delaying, or restricting abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. So, Daniel Horowitz, still with us. Would this essentially allow for abortion up to the point of birth if this is passed in Florida?
So the or negates the first clause, and or is an independent clause. So that means or if your Planned Parenthood doctor, because that's who performs it, determines that it's necessary. Now, I don't think there's a single abortion that a Planned Parenthood, not even doctor, but healthcare provider would determine is not necessary. So in that clause, there are no restrictions. And remember, when you put something in a constitution as a constitutional right, a fundamental right, it is out of the realm of the legislature to regulate it. So the answer is, if there is no limiting language or definitions in the text, which there are none, sometimes they have it in that Amendment 4, there are no there's no definition of viability. There's no determination of, when there's a healthcare necessity or what a healthcare provider is. So it could be the secretary at the Planned Parenthood office. That would mean all Gosnell regulatory laws are out. The nature of the clinic, the qualifications of the doctor, the time, it could be partial birth. There is nothing limiting it there. And then also voids out parental consent, just says that you have to have parental notification, but that implicitly nullifies parental consent. So the punchline is this: if we don't act now, Florida, which is the bastion of conservatism, but also South Dakota, Missouri, Montana, and Nebraska, not to mention Nevada and Arizona, which are tougher ones, they will all have abortion laws that are looser than the loosest countries in Europe, like Iceland.
So Daniel, riddle us this. How in the hell, in Florida, as you mentioned, 20 points, DeSantis wins, does this thing get on the ballot?
So look, to get on the ballot, the thing is, and I don't know Florida offhand, but most states is something like 8-10%, signatures of 8-10% of the electorate from the previous gubernatorial election. So look, in every state, you're going to have the blue enclaves where if you have money, which they certainly do, it takes money to do a petition drive, they're going to be able to get it on the ballot. And this is why we really need to revisit what our founders did not want with direct democracy, the ability to do this. But so that they can do in all 50, all states that have it.
With money.
The issue is, okay, then why should it be able to pass? And the answer is, it can only pass if Republicans toss the fight. I mean, if they get on the playing field and just alert in all the Republican Party, county party mailers of this is what the Republican Party recommends, it would take in Florida, I think with a million person voter registration edge that the GOP has, it would take roughly a fifth of Republicans plus 100% of independents and Democrats to get 60%. So this could only pass if Republicans toss the fight. But I'll tell you, out of the 20 Republican congressmen, only 6 or 7 have been forced to mention it one time on Twitter.
They've tweeted it.
And in the other red states, well, just take red states, the governors of Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, and Kristi Noem in South Dakota have not even uttered a word, and this is the Super Bowl of the life issue.
So with that, why did it take so long to get a few tweets? And it's like the Matt Gaetz, Corey Mills, Byron Donalds of the world that finally did come out on Twitter and say, hey, I am voting no. Donald Trump, one night we didn't really know how he was going to come out against this. And then the next day, he actually did come out and do an interview saying, I am going to vote no on this. Why did it take so long for these Republican lawmakers to come out and say, no, this is absolutely, we are voting no on this issue?
Well, even after Trump came out, we thought that everyone would oppose it. But no, a lot of them have not. In fact, there have been those that have been confronted by activists and they said it's a state issue. And what was funny is at the same time, they were complaining about that the DeSantis administration had a draft plan to possibly put pickleball courts in state parks. And as federal officials, they were like, we're going to lie down on the tracks, oppose it. All right, fine. But somehow abortion was like the Super Bowl. Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is Republicans are righteous when the ball is not in play. When the ball is actually in play in the Super Bowl, then they run away. Before Dobbs, this wasn't an issue that you can do much on. So in fact, Republicans postured as pro-life to shield themselves from fighting on fiscal issues and other things. Now that this is, this is like the bottom of the ninth inning. You're in a red state and they're on the verge of codifying unrestricted abortion, and they don't even want to talk about it.
Look, I think we have the YouTube title for this video, Republicans Exposed, because they are absolutely exposed when it comes to crunch time on this issue. And it's disgusting what's happened. People out there need to realize how many national leaders, quote unquote leaders, right, on this issue don't seem to be very concerned with what's going on in these states. But I want to get at what we were talking about before the show, which is so important, I think, near and dear to myself, Jill, and everyone here at Blaze, that we need to talk about more. And it's something that you've been on about for a while. I used to say red states, new tech, new media after 2020. That's what was needed. Yep. We need to build up red states because we're 100% in charge, as you said, of those places. But people still don't seem to get the message, which is that regardless of who wins the presidency, am I right? We either have a network of people in these states, of activists, of people actually doing the work, pushing leaders to do the right thing, or we don't. And it doesn't matter, in a sense, who wins the presidency. If we don't have that, we'll have nothing.
Look, you look at the ballot initiatives, you look at state legislative primaries, gubernatorial primaries, state AG, state secretary of state, all this stuff. If we had an activism tool in red states to get involved, I'm telling you, the realm of outcomes are as wide as having a beacon of liberty versus maybe a pro-gun version of California. That's all these other Republican governors want to make of red states. And right now, thankfully, we have the State Freedom Caucus Network. They're in 12 states. We need them in about, at least 23, 24 of them. And I could tell you, commensurate with how many Freedom Caucus guys we have in a state is how much we're moving the ball. Florida, we have the governor. Louisiana, we now have a governor with a very strong Freedom Caucus. Other states, we have to fight the governor. We have to, like in Oklahoma. Oklahoma just got a Freedom Caucus. And I think this is our foothold to create a red state insurance policy that no matter what happens, I tell people, you look at the French elections and people point to that map that Le Pen's party won such a large swath of the land, the rural expanse of the country, but, they lost. There's nothing you can do. It's winner take all. Here, worst case scenario, Harris wins. There are still, thanks to the polarization, we're having trouble winning a lot of places. But the good news is the Democrat brand permanently is destroyed in about half the states. They can't win either. Mm-hmm. Why don't we have 25 Californias? That needs to be the question we answer.
In red states that have super majorities, which just mean some of them are conservative, most of them probably are not. What can be done in states like that to ensure that we have 25 solid red states?
Here's the difference between a red state and a blue state. Even though the Republicans are often like Democrats and all but name only, but they know the majority of the people are with us. If you exert pressure on them, see, when you call Congress, and I don't want to discourage people from getting involved, but it's dubious as to how much that does. These guys in these smaller states are not used to, the legislators used to getting calls. And I think when you influence them, now we have a Freedom Caucus that is able to force votes. Until now, they would just, okay, no one knew that there was an opportunity to clamp down on the agenda in the schools, on illegal immigration at a state level. You could discourage it. So you don't know what you don't know. Now they're forcing votes. What they're doing is they're wearing a new jersey. The problem is they always wear our jersey in the primaries. And then people are confused. And, you ever see, I live in Maryland, even Larry Hogan in the primary, and he wasn't really, there was no real threat that he would lose, but he sounded like me. And then the day later, he endorses Roe v. Wade. This is the game these guys play. We got to get involved in primaries. And now what they have done is there's now a slate. Your Uniparty or your Freedom Caucus, Uniparty or Freedom Caucus. And increasingly, we're finding South Dakota, Wyoming, a lot of states, you've had 100 years worth of incumbency thrown out. We have done a horrible job throwing out incumbents in Congress. We've been shut out. State legislature, the good news is, in the states where there's a Freedom Caucus, we are making strides, getting in new people.
Well, Daniel Horowitz, thanks so much for being in studio with us today.
So much fun.
It's so great having you here. Stop back anytime.
Will do. Take care.
The managing editor for Return will explain YouTube's online monopoly and how it can be broken up after this. Last month, a court ruled that Google has acted as a monopoly through its illegal domination of online search. And a recent article at theblaze.com argues that YouTube needs its own antitrust security. Here to discuss is Peter Gietl, the managing editor for Return and Frontier magazine. So, Peter, should YouTube be investigated for potential antitrust violations?
Yeah, I think absolutely. They've exhibited behavior for, going on decades now of collusion and monopolistic practices, stifling competitors, price gouging, price fixing. There's really a strong argument to be made on this.
So when we look at Google in general, can you just kind of explain the origins, like big picture, origins of Google to present day and how we got to this situation?
Well, you have to go back to the mid-90s, and there's been a lot written about they were originally funded by DARPA through a grant, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, about establishing online libraries. But there was actually a secondary DARPA funding of, basically they wanted the ability to track search queries and see what it was called, like birds of a feather, of different groups. And they thought if they could keep track of different groups and what they were searching, it would be an extremely powerful tool to track the population. So Google came out of that original funding from Stanford that was backed by DARPA. So they've had a long and storied history of kind of collusion with the alphabet agencies. And then they were able to parlay that ability of search to become monopolistic, where, Google controls 90% of search, and I think most of the rest of it runs through YouTube, which is also owned by Google. And any business that wants to advertise has to play in their sandbox, and they have to follow their rules, and they control basically all of the online advertising and search queries in the entire world.
Yeah, YouTube is essentially a search engine. When you look at it with Blaze content that goes out there, we know that they're suppressing the content of conservatives and conservative speech and not letting these messages get out. And who knows what's going to happen in November if that gets even worse. But right now where we are, how is this still allowed to happen? That we still know right? That Google and YouTube are suppressing content all over the place.
Yeah, I mean, Blaze has experienced it a lot of conservative, I mean, especially during COVID, there was so much censorship that occurred with these online organizations. I mean, unfortunately, it's a fact of the matter in America, there's a lot of, it's not the free market that we kind of used to think of it as. There's certain giant players in a lot of these industries that wield tremendous amounts of power. And I mean, even if Google hasn't swung elections or anything, the fact that they have the ability to do that should be disconcerting, and they certainly do.
Yeah, let's explain this a little bit just in terms of Blaze, in the situation that Blaze is in. I think, like any company on the right, we would prefer not to be in business with these people at all. But the problem is, if you want to reach people and you actually want to generate revenue, you don't have an alternative ecosystem that's large enough in which to do that. And even if we did, we would still want at least a shingle there to reach more people and bring them in to whatever new thing we were on, right? So you're stuck in a way with Google, you're stuck with YouTube, no matter who you are. Now, obviously, we want to work to get out of that situation because of what we're talking about here. But practically speaking, you are stuck with them in some way if you're on the right and you're a large enough media company. Now, when we put videos out there now, even now, right, to this day, you need to realize this if you're listening. This is why we need you to just subscribe and support us directly, because the more people that do that, the more we don't have to worry about any of this. But right now, there are still, to this day, there are still videos when we put out a video onto YouTube and we talk about certain topics, we know that we'll be demonetized, that will be taken down, they'll shut your whole channel down, and you still have to play these games with them. So I mean, Peter, do you think this court decision against Google will have any real life impact? And do you think that this route, this path of attacking them on antitrust is going to bear fruit?
Yeah, I think it certainly has the possibility that it could affect their practices. There's also another huge antitrust coming through about their advertising practices and how they run online ads. Whether they could actually break up Google, I'm more incredulous about that. I don't know if that's possible. But I think that these type of rulings, or if a future administration kind of made moves a little bit, hopefully it will steer them and force them to want to not go as far as maybe they could, that it would kind of scare them a little bit of the threat of this hanging over them. I think could be a good thing.
Let's just go a little further. Let's push a little further, just because this is Blaze News tonight, and we can, and that's why we're here. We had a guest on not too long ago say this, and I thought it was very interesting. He said, look, antitrust, yeah, you could break up Google, the company, but you can't break up a search engine. So in a way, they know they're safe, that they still have that product, right? So if you break up the company, that's one thing. Now, I kind of think, I'm curious what you'll think. I kind of think the more we push them, the better. The more we attack them, the better. And so, like you're saying, let's just go with whatever attack angle we have. But I wonder how true that is. Words haunt me. I believe this was Robert Epstein, who's done a lot of research about Google's impact on elections.
I mean, I don't know how you would go about breaking up a search engine. I mean, the other thing that's kind of not reported as much is Google's search is somewhat broken right now.
Yeah.
And I have sources inside Google that have said that they don't even know why exactly it's broken. Mm-hmm. They have theories. But when you even look up to try to find something, it's so much harder now than it was a couple of years ago. There's something seems to be going wrong with their entire software.
I feel like it would have to be like the Gorelick Wall. Do you remember this back from the 90s in the Clinton administration, where they actually got in trouble with it with the Clinton administration because like the FBI couldn't talk to the CIA and they all kept in their own silos and they weren't sharing information. It's almost like we have to reverse that and say, Google, you have to have siloed information where you can't be sharing absolutely everything that's going on.
Well, I mean, Google claims this, and I don't doubt it, is they say that they know you better than you know yourself.
Of course they do.
Because they know what it's not what you present on the outside, it's what you're actually searching for and buying and interested in.
This is why return is so important. This is why you're managing it to return, to help warn people about this and for us to help figure out ways to get the heck out of this situation.
Peter, thanks so much for coming in and enlightening us once again.
Thank you, Jill.
When we come back, Bud Light tries to man up just in time for football season after the break. Back in 2023, Bud Light faced a major boycott after partnering with Dylan Mulvaney. Now, the company apparently took notes because they've since hired comedian Shane Gillis to star in one of their commercials.
All you have to do is confess.
All right, I'll go first. Grease the wheels a little.
What? No.
I confess that I practice my halftime speeches in the shower before games.
So, Peterson, on the male spectrum, you cannot get further from a Dylan Mulvaney to a Shane Gillis.
Yeah, so you went from a transvestite to a canceled red estate-coated comedian who's made a ferocious comeback and is incredibly popular. I think the messaging couldn't be clearer, and that's what this article at theblaze.com is pointing out. It's very obvious, it's transparent in a way, right, what they're doing, and they're trying to say, no, we're not moving in that direction anymore. As the article says, you remember the advertising executive at the time, we had to get away from the fratty culture.
That's right.
Of Bud Light.
That's right.
To advertise to, I don't know, the many fans of Dylan Mulvaney, you know.
The tens of fans of Dylan Mulvaney out there instead of the hundreds of thousands of Americans that previously bought your product.
Yeah.
That's the way they went. So is this going to be a signal towards the end of woke marketing?
So, you know, you have people saying that. I'm very suspicious of all of this because I think that what people need to realize is that a lot of times when, you know, the right sort of says, oh, the wokeness is going away, and there's reason to think it is. I mean, there is real pushback, especially legally right now. So a lot of companies realize they could be in legal trouble if they keep this up because of some of the good things the courts have been doing. But don't trust this. I mean, don't think these are victories because, say with Bud Light, I don't know right now whether or not if I go to their website or I reach inside the company, right, and call a friend, if they've really changed much at all. And what these companies have done for decades is subvert their brands and therefore America's image by they know the market, right? By presenting themselves as, yes, we're on your side, America. And then around the edges, they start to nip it, right? All this stuff. And Dylan Mulvaney was a bridge too far. It was a natural reaction. It wasn't really a boycott. It was people just saying, to hell with this. Like, you've ruined my brand. So that was great. And this is a great sign. It's what you want to see. But I think you have to trust but verify here. You really have to do your homework. And we'll do the homework for you at Blaze and at Align. To look into whether Bud Light has really made a change.
Yeah, and it is. It's all the red, white, and blue marketing, the Americana. I mean, it's right there on just the packaging for Bud and Bud Light. That you see it right there. That they're trying to just say, oh, you know, it's America from the beginning.
Right.
But that's not who they are anymore.
Yeah. So don't you think, like, say the NFL is like this, right? The NFL knows that they know intuitively what they're supposed to be or what they used to be, and they got scared of of being called bad names, and they think it's very progressive to push all this sort of stuff. So you have, the NFL is gay ad from the NFL, and you're just like, why are we talking about sexuality? Like, what is going on here, right? And they push this. I mean, many of the teams, they fund all this kind of woke, crazy stuff, and they do that quietly, but they slowly present it, right, to normalize it using their brand position. That's what's so insidious about this, and that's why I say you just can't trust them.
When you look at kind of the theme of today's episode, there is kind of a through line in the pushing back against just the wokeness and getting red states to be redder and standing up for what we know could happen, right? They're simple steps. Mm-hmm. They might not be the easiest ones, but they are also not like, the hardest things that we've ever done. We just have to start standing up. Yeah.
So I think that the theme, it's funny how it worked out in this show really is, it is simple steps, but they're things that we've been complacent about, people have been complacent about. And it's like, have you really done the deal? Right. That's nice. You have Shane Gillis on. We like that. And you've rejected some craziness and showing that to us. But have you really changed as a company? What else are you hiding from me? I don't know. I want to know. And I need to know now as a consumer before I start making those choices with my dollars so that I'm not held hostage by woke capital. Some of these companies are giving, millions and millions of dollars to people who, frankly, hate us and everything we believe in, oddly, right? It's like, I don't hate you, but so you got to trust but verify. So that's doing the work. What we heard from Horowitz was the same thing. So important. You have to, in red states, hold these people accountable. It doesn't matter what's going on nationally. If in your own state, you're bringing in illegal immigrants under the cover, again, just like the advertisers, right? Under the cover of, oh, I'm a Republican and here I am with barbecue and, hunting and whatever. And also, we're going to let these illegals in because that's what Jesus will want us to do. Like, excuse me, what?
Yeah, in the reddest states in America, this is happening in right now. And just the importance of Daniel when he was talking about the state freedom caucuses that are popping up. And I know that I used to live in the state of Tennessee, and they had tried to come in there, and they said, oh, you have a supermajority. You are nowhere close to even being a little hub for a state freedom caucus. You have so much work left to do. And it's so upsetting when you see a state that you would think is super red. And again, like we have a Ron DeSantis. He exists in America. All the red governors just go follow what he's doing. And Greg Abbott does that to an extent.
Right.
He started being pulled over to the right by what DeSantis was doing. But there's still so many more huge wins.
Yeah.
That could be had right now.
They have to be pushed. Like they're not going to do it themselves. They're cowards. They have to be pushed, and that means forget about the Californians are moving to my state or it's all the people. No. In Texas, for instance, Republicans are in charge of the trustees and who are in charge of the schools. So don't tell me that someone from out of state is causing the University of Texas, to be a bunch of libs. That's on you. And all we have to do is hold them accountable. What Daniel said that was really interesting, really important, and something that we need to do more of is shame these people with the power of media. And you all out there can do that too. We're going to do that together. We just shame these people and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And a lot of them will fold like a cheap suit.
Well, and with the Florida 4 stuff, like finally we got some of the congressmen to come out and actually say that they were going to vote no against it. And then Donald Trump came out and gave them the cover and said, I'm going to vote no as well. I want to see more from that, right? Like this is a really easy, simple solution that, okay, we can't put this into the Constitution in the state of Florida.
Yeah, and by the way, the DeSantis example should be, this is how you win.
Yes.
You'll win by 20 points. Because over and over again, you'll hear from the moderates, oh no, we couldn't do this because people think differently and we all need it. DeSantis won by 20 points. That is the lesson they don't want to learn, and we need to force them to learn as we move forward. And we will.
And we will. And it's the start of NFL season tonight. And are your Bills going to have a chance this season?
Of course, more than a chance. We have Josh Allen. There's always more than a chance with Josh.
I'll be cheering for them. Don't worry. I'll join your bandwagon for this season because I only cheer for my friends now. I've given up on NFL teams as a whole. I only care about the Iowa Hawkeyes. That's it. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Don't forget to rate and review the show. We'll be back with more Blaze News tonight, tomorrow.